Passons donc à la première session de discussion concernant les réponses gouvernementales à la transformation de l'EFTP en vue du développement durable. Cette session sera présidée par M. David Atchoarena, qui est directeur de la division pour les politiques et les systèmes d'apprentissage tout au long de la vie au sein de l'UNESCO. Et puis, nous avons également 5 participants, à savoir M. Peter Thiele, qui est député directeur pour les politiques d'éducation et de formation professionnelle au ministère de l'Éducation et de la Recherche fédérale d'Allemagne. Nous avons également Masa'udu Adamu Kazaure, secrétaire exécutif Conseil du Nigeria pour l'éducation technique. Ensuite, Monsieur Victor Hugo Diaz Mora, qui est directeur de la coopération internationale de l'Instituto Nacional de Aprendizaje de Costa Rica.
Marković, Assistant Minister for Secondary Education and Adult Education at the Ministry of Education, Science and Technological Development of Serbia. And last but not least, Mr. Jamal ALOUA, Secretary General of the Department of Vocational Training of the Ministry of National Education and Vocational Training in Morocco. Welcome to all of you, and I would now hand over to David for the panel discussion.
Thank you, and again, good morning, bonjour. It's my pleasure to moderate this first panel, and I'd like to also welcome and thank the distinguished panelists which are here with me on this head table. In order to, start our discussion in relation to youth skills, I mean, we thought that it was appropriate to start by looking at the perspective in terms of policies in countries, on how countries actually address issues related to youth skills, youth unemployment, and also to look at how TVET is used as a very important policy instrument to address those issues, and also to more broadly contribute to social inclusion, equity, as well as sustainable development. Of course, we are aware that the situations are very different. Countries differ a lot when it comes to not only the level of development of TVET systems, but of course when it comes to the socio-economic conditions. And therefore, we choose to have a broad, and rich landscape with experiences from Africa, from Arab states, from Europe, as well as from Latin America. So we believe that this will really give us a very good overview of both the challenges, but also, the directions in terms of policy responses. So I'm very glad to welcome our panelists, and we have here for this first session Mr. Peter Thiele, who is the Deputy Director for VET Policy in the Federal Ministry of Education and Research here in Germany. And we know that Germany is often looked at as a very important and successful model in the field of TVET, and that many countries are actually looking at the so-called dual system, as a source of inspiration to reform their own system and their own TVET programs. I'm glad also to have here on the table Mrs. Amina Idris, who is Director of the Center of Excellence at the National Board for Technical Education in Nigeria. Welcome. Nigeria is one of the largest economies in Africa. And it's also a country which has built a very large and very strong TVET system. So we are also, very honored and pleased to have the opportunity of having this perspective, with the rich experience of Nigeria, with its also diversified economy, and at the same time a number of challenges when it comes to youth employment and youth issues in general. Moving to Latin America, we have with us today Mr. Victor Hugo Diaz Mora, who is head of international cooperation at the Instituto Nacional de Aprendizaje in Costa Rica. Welcome with us, Mr. Hugo Diaz Mora. It was for us essential to have also a representative from Latin America on this panel. Latin America has a very, I would say, unique and distinctive experience in the field of TVET, with dedicated agencies which are actually providing TVET for youth. And Costa Rica has a very rich and long experience through INA in this field, and therefore we are very much looking forward also to this approach to TVET, which provides, I would say, an alternative model, to what other countries often are using to address youth policies and youth training systems. Moving again back to Europe, we are glad to have with us Mrs. Snežana Marković. Welcome, who is Assistant Minister for Secondary Education and Adult Education in the Ministry of Education, Science and Technological Development in Serbia. Again, for us, it's important to recall that our perspective at UNESCO is global. Also, that the new agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals, are universal, and therefore, when we look at both TVET policies, systems, and issues of youth employment, we really need to have this overall perspective. And finally, we have here also Monsieur Jamal Eddine ALOUA, qui est secrétaire général au département de la formation professionnelle.
General Secretary of Department of Vocational Training at the Ministry for Education and Vocational Training in Morocco.
From a country from the Arab region. In fact, when we look at the issues of youth and particular youth employment, the Arab region is one which has one of the strongest challenges in terms of the size and the growth of the youth population and the unemployment situation of youth. So really, it's a top policy issue for Arab countries. And again, we are glad to have here the opportunity to have the experience and the perspective of Morocco, which also has a very, I would say, rich and diversified experience in the field of TVET, both in relation to technical education as well as regarding the vocational training systems. So again, bienvenue parmi nous, Monsieur ALOUA. In order to organize the discussions, I'm going to ask each panelist three questions, and that will be taken subsequently. Hopefully, I will ask you to try to be concise, maybe try to answer within 6 or 7 minutes, so that we can also have time for an exchange with the room. The three questions are the following. First of all, we would like you to give us a brief overview of the challenges but also opportunities concerning youth employment as well as transition to green economies in your countries. We've also, elements regarding the gender equity aspect. We would also like to have a perspective on the actions which are considered to facilitate youth employment and entrepreneurship and promote gender equity and the transition to green societies in your respective countries. And finally, we would like also to have your, your perspective on the contribution of TVET to the broad sustainable development agenda, including SDG 4 on education, but more broadly, how TVET can also, contribute to the different dimensions of sustainable development up to 2030, considering your own context. So I think that if we have those three, elements, we will have at the end of your presentations a very rich perspective that will also allow fruitful exchange with the room. So without taking more time, I would like to start by inviting Mr. Peter Thiele, for addressing those three questions.
Thank you very much. I would like to take the chance, before answering to your question, at least to say some words regarding our cooperation with UNESCO and UNEVOC. I'm very happy to welcome you on behalf of the German Ministry for Education and Research. We are one of the co-sponsors and also active hosts of UNEVOC in Germany. I've been personally involved that time in the discussion, negotiation of UNEVOC becoming a part of Germany's UN family. I think it's already 20 years ago, that time with Mr. Tang, who is today ADG in UNESCO. And as we can see today, it's UNEVOC has become a success story, and thank you very much, Mr. Majumdar, for your active collaboration with us, but also for your active networking with the world. We have today the World Youth Skills Day, and I see a lot of friends around who are not really in the core of UNESCO, but nevertheless very important partners from the European Commission, from CEDEFOP, from World Skills, several representatives. So the idea of UNEVOC to network, to build the platform for exchange of good practice, to start cooperation. I forgot ETF, European Training Foundation, yes. Really works, and that's a very, very good message. Because we are convinced that TVET is a key pillar for economic growth and also for good chances of young people to make good careers. Coming now to the German situation, from the bird's view, one could say everything is okay. We are fine. We are in a paradise compared to many other world regions. If you look to the youth unemployment rates, they are about 6%. The transition of apprenticeship to labor market is really working. We have high level of employment in Germany, so the system is working, the dual system is working, but one has on the one hand to confess that this also not only belongs to the VET system, but also to macroeconomic data, which are different in different countries, and that was the reason why I didn't bring along a 2 hours presentation on the dual system. You can't just transfer, as Mr. Lindenthal said already, a system as such. You can think about the transfer of principles, but not at the system as such. And also in Germany, it took hundreds of years to develop this kind of system and to get the engagement of industry in order to be the core partner in this education area. But one has to say our economy is definitely convinced that dual training, VET, which is labor market oriented, is the backbone of Germany's industrial and economic success. Coming to away from the bird's view, where everything is fine, we have to face several challenges for sure. If you have a high standard in your VET system, there are many young people that might not be able to cope with that. So we have every year still about 250,000 young people who don't make it to the dual system. They go to transition phase, go to preparatory measures and so on. And this is a real loss in our society because we have, not only for the young people, but we have also the demographic problem. We have less and less people, young people coming out of schools. Anyhow, Germany is shrinking from 80 to about 60 million in a couple of decades. Might be we get smaller than France. purely by demography, and so we have to use all resources that we have in our country and use also the possibilities of our education system in order to make them to skilled workforce. The other challenge that we have is that VET is getting into higher competition, also in Germany, with the higher education system. More and more young people tend to go to higher education. We still have about 50% going to the vocational training system, but more and more go to higher education. But at the same time, these young people often fail. We have 28% of dropouts in the bachelor area, for example. And one can see that vocational orientation, vocational guidance is a central issue for our country in order to cope with that, to make young people do better decisions. And many of the dropouts in higher education can really be tracked with, I would say, turbo careers. We offer them, if you come to us into the VET system, you do not only get your qualification, you get already parts of the following continuing training. You get the possibility to be entrepreneur, to take over the company. So this is a good example that shows that it's not a kind of isolated pillar system, VET in higher education, and it's not that only VET people want to get better permeability to higher education, but that it's also working vice versa. I think what is also important as concerns the German VET system is that we deliver qualifications in our system on a non-academic level that are in other countries often provided on an academic level. So we have about 320 qualifications that are nationwide recognized by industry in the education system, like bankers. I would also take the example of nurses, which are not in the dual system, but often in other countries on an academic level, in our country on a non-academic level, opticians, and. So we have a broad range of qualifications from hairdresser to IT specialists to bankers that are covered via the VET system, which is also an important message, I think. If you want to have an attractive system, you have to broaden it up, and you have to work with minimum quality standards, and you have to work with standardization so that the certificate that you get has really a value in the labor market. Another challenge that we have is, in fact, the point of excellence and attractiveness. We are very happy that you combined the launch of the TVET strategy, which is having our full support, because never mind which status you have in the sense of economic development, the challenges are pretty the same. That's what we could see with the TVET strategy, so we can subscribe the strategy fully, and are also still seeking solutions in several fields, as, for example, concerns the question of career development. We have a good system of initial training, continuing training, but there is not yet a broad availability of top qualifications in vocational training in the grey zone to higher education. And what we work for now is to broaden this kind of top qualifications in vocational training, either by combining non-academic and academic studies. For example, we have possibilities for young people to do an apprenticeship and at the same time to go to university, and when you come out you have a double qualification and can start your position, if you go to the industry, directly with a leadership position. But you know what you talk about. You're not just an academic, you know what you talk about when you come into the enterprise, because you know the working processes and so on. So this is one big thing. The other big thing is that we to get away from the view on formal qualifications. We have sometimes a kind of hidden fences in our system. If you don't have this and this qualification, you have no chance to move on. And so we opened up, in cooperation with our lender, for example, the possibility that even people that have no higher entry qualification have the chance, after they did a vocational training, to go to university and to select what they want to study. So to open that up. We have a huge program running now with about 250 million, where we open up universities who have their academic processes to open up, and their demography comes as is a favor for us, to open up for new target groups. They also have to cope with working people that want probably to study study in the evening when the university is closed. They want to have professors in the evening. They want to have a more flexible learning pathways. So this is another trend that we do. And the third point where we also have a challenge in our system is that since we have standards, quality standards in our system, and not everybody gets in, and since we are convinced that people are individuals and not to be tracked like in a socialist system with a number from A to B to C, the disadvantage of that model is that, on the other hand, you have people that just disappear. They go out of school, the Federal Employment Office helps them to come into labor market or to qualification, but if they are contacted twice when they go, nobody tracks them. So suddenly we have a couple of years later about, and that's the situation right now in Germany, about 2 million young people, about 25, 28, who have no qualification at all, but who are needed and who are working on the labor market somehow as unskilled workers. And there we found that it's a loss of chances if we don't give them more reputation. And so we said, even if they have no qualification, they have a lot of knowledge. What we talk about today, they have a lot of skills. So we work now on a nationwide model that people, even without qualification, have the possibility to validate their skills and get a certificate that gives at least equality to the formal qualification. Together with the chambers of handicrafts, welcome to my colleague who is also here and speaking later, but also with the chambers of industry. So it's again a public-private partnership, a win-win situation for industry as well as for us as representatives of the ministry. And I don't want to talk too long. I'm always so convinced about what we're doing that this is the risk, but at least I want to propose to give you another very, very good initiative that we are working now on. This is the so-called initiative of education chains. Very often in schools, secondary schools, you find young people who are in risk, who have not the help of their families, who live in some bad social environment. And we try to get them as early as possible from the Federal Ministry of Education, which has no say in general schools. We are just dealing with vocational training and higher education partly, but in schools we have no say. This is up to the Länder. And though our constitution forbids the cooperation between federal level and Länder, we found our ways to do so and came up with a kind of a common approach where we do potential analysis of potentials of these young people in schools, 100,000 of young people, where we don't look, are you good in this and this, math, German, English, or whatsoever, but we look for hidden potentials of the young people. We build on the hidden potentials. As soon as we see there is something, either there or missing, we try to help them over a couple of years. It's not just one measure. We take them with buddies, with professionals for a couple of years, take their hands, make arrangements with their parents, make arrangements with their families in order to bring them to the school certificate and afterwards to a vocational training. And even in vocational training, these young people are accompanied by these buddies, the professionals. And this is a very successful story. In the meantime, we had high dropout rates in general schools that are going down. We had a lot of people that went to the transition system that go now more to vocational training. And it's about 500,000 young people that we cover for the time being and 115,000 that are accompanied. So only the ones who have problems that are accompanied over years, up to 6 years. I think that is a very good working and excellent model, and that might also be the blueprint for some activities as concerns the aforementioned, Barona Linta mentioned, refugee situation, which is not only now coming to other world regions as mentioned, but also to Germany. We have far more than 1 million refugees now in Germany just from last year. About 50% of them are below 25, so they are potential for us, for our labor markets, as already discussed regarding our demographic situation. But they are also a challenge because very often they don't have the qualification that is needed to do a skilled work job, and we work with a whole set of instruments in order to get them to good German, which is an asset. Without German you can't do the training, you can't work on a qualified level in the labor market. We try to give them vocational guidance, we try to do profiling, we make tests to see what potential do they already have, what can we acknowledge already, and work with a whole set of programs on their integration, knowing that this is a long-term activity. From this 500 million, it's for the time being just 16,000 that had applied for apprenticeship in the dual system. But we think in the next year there will be a big wave coming, and we try to prepare for that situation. Last sentence as concerns opening up for new target groups, opening up for skilled labor, also from other countries in Germany. We have a quite interesting law, the so-called recognition law, that people that come from abroad, never mind where they come from, but have the right to stay in Germany, they have also the right to get their qualification recognized. So an individual right to go to the chambers, to go to the lenders, who are those who are responsible for the qualification, in order to get the recognition of what they bring along from the other country. If something is missing, they have the possibility to top up their qualification in order to get the national qualification. That is a new, relatively new law that is well accepted by people from other countries, and that is part of our strategy to get young people also from other world regions, and in particular for sure also from other countries around Europe to us. Final word, international cooperation is for us in the ministry the asset, not only via bilateral programs, via European programs on mobility exchange, but also as concerns curricular development in Germany. We try to include international competences, language competences and other things into our curricula and training codes. So we are really committed to that, and also here we have some representatives of the Federal Institute for Vocational Training, our permanent partner in the development of VET, who are the one-stop shop unit or department in Germany for international cooperation. With the initiative GoVet, we try to give other countries the possibility not only to talk about cooperation, but really to do cooperation, and that's what the big team is there for. Also here, so if you want to network and to do cooperation, please address to my colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thiele, for this very comprehensive perspective. I'd just like to maybe to underline 2 or 3 points that you made. I mean, first of all, the importance of developing articulation and building ready learning pathways between different, sub-segments of the education and training system. I think this is really a major a principle for promoting lifelong learning, and I think this is the case also in other countries. The importance of quality standards also is a point that you made very strongly, which I think is worth noting. It's interesting also to see that attractiveness, even in Germany, attractiveness of TVET is a challenge, and this is really, I would say, a global issues. So, I mean, looking at different experiences on how to improve the attractiveness of TVET is very, very important. Also, the development of recognition of prior learning, of experiential learning, also as a way to actually promote professional development, social inclusion, and to establish really lifelong learning is something which is essential when we look at contemporary policies in the field of TVET. Very also interesting the points that you made about preventing early dropout at secondary level. This is certainly an issue in many countries in Europe, but also, of course, beyond Europe. So maybe this is something that we can take up also later on in our discussion. And finally, I'd like to also to stress your last point about mobility and the recognition of foreign qualifications, which is a very important principle for UNESCO. As we know, we are promoting this principle in the field of higher education through a number of conventions, and we are now looking also at how we could approach this issue in the field of vocational education. So we are also interested in this particular experience and the establishment of this new right in Germany. So thanks for again all those points, I would like to turn to Mrs. Amina Idris to have, perspectives from Nigeria.
Good morning. Nigeria, with a population of about 177 million, is really grappling with the challenges of youth unemployment. And you agree with me that these areas TVET strategy are very dear to our hearts, because right now the present government is putting technical vocational education as a key focus in addressing some of these challenges. And the National Board for Technical Education, to which I belong, is a regulatory body for technical vocational education. And so we are in the front burner of helping the government in addressing some of these issues. We have the youth the insurgency in the northeast of the country, and the youth restiveness in the south, and boys drop out in the northeast, and low participation and enrollment of girls in the north, from where I come from. So I'm happy to be a model for the girls in that area. And so some of these, thank you. And so what we have put as focus to address some of these areas of youth unemployment really is TVET, like I said. And the focus also is on the competency-based education and training, so that we can, skill these youths and give them a source of livelihood and empowerment. So the National Board for Technical Education coordinates all aspects of technical vocational education falling outside the universities, and it also sets minimum standards, for programs in these areas. We have already the National Vocational Qualification Framework, which was, approved by the Federal Executive Council in 2013, the 6-level National Vocational Education Framework. Also, in 2006-2007, the Federal Ministry of Education and NBTE, that's National Board for Technical Education, established the Vocational Education and Enterprise Institutions and the Innovation Enterprise Institutions. These are public, private, driven, PPP-driven institutions, and have 70% of their training practical-based. Also, the entrepreneurship was embedded in all the programs of the institutions, because it was found to be very important in also helping to empower and skill our youth. Right now, each institution has as compulsory to establish entrepreneurship centers in their institutions. And the entrepreneurship area is also linked to the formal sector, because we have the area of non-formal. Like I said, the government has realized the importance of the non-formal and informal sector. And so it's looking towards the board also coordinating this area, because we have realized that the chunk, 90 or more than 90% of TVET is rested in this area. And sincerely, if you look at the scenario, you find out that these are the people actually contributing to the economy of the country. You have any little problem, you with plumbing job, with electrical, you call out these people, and you find out they are at the, the skill is there. Maybe they just need to be linked properly, so that there will be pathways the formal we gain from the non-formal and vice versa. Very beautiful thing will come out from when those are properly linked up. Another challenge that we have seriously is the near, absence of industries. So that proper linkage is not there. And the practical experience can be gotten only from this, smooth linkage with the industries. So the national vocational qualifications, sincerely, is like my former colleague has already said, we're looking at the recognition of prior learning so that these people can be, or just assessed, their competence can be assessed, and they can have some form of progression. Considering that we also find out that in TVET, we have to also, open up access and allow, so many number of our youths to also gain from the training. And so we are also looking at the area of using ICT tools to improve access in TVET. And the area of open and distance learning or open flexible learning is an area that the board is also looking at. Already we have sensitized few of our polytechnics and are looking at them as pilot institutions to kickstart some of these innovative approaches so that we could also bring in the marginalized in the society. And that women are part of this also program, and we can also reach out to the rural areas and also help our institutions to impact on the livelihood of their communities through the bringing out some courses in the non-formal area. So the government is really looking at NBTE to coordinate the non-formal and informal sector, like I said. In 2013, the board had a very rich forum by UNEVOC in Abuja, where we sensitized on the area of greening and the importance of agri. Right now, because of a lot of restiveness in the oil region, the government is, and the downturn in the oil area, the government is seriously looking at diversifying and looking at alternative sources of generation of power and of empowerment. There are so many areas that have been neglected, for example, the agri sector. So the government is looking at this area to engage the youths. We have so many large number of out-of-school children that need to be in school because we can seriously see that our future are just roaming the street, our future leaders. And so there is need to bring them in and avoid the sort of turning them into a devil's workshop because they can be very, very restive. So the government is right now doing a lot of also feeding to address the issue of poverty in our institutions and to attract students to the schools. And like I said, the VEIs are providing credible alternative form of education that will absorb a lot of categories of candidates. Students who need practical skills, that's the vocational education institutions, and the innovation education enterprise institutions. Students who need practical skills to secure jobs. Students, career paths that don't really need to have, like he said, university degrees. Nigerians who have not studied for some time and want to link up and gain some, trade. Nigerians without time to study at all in the university for full-time courses. All this opening of access to enable them have that chance. So that is for the vocational enterprise institutions and innovation enterprise institutions. Now, the area of greening, the board has developed with the aid of UNESCO and the MDGs, a renewable energy curriculum, because the area of renewable energies is dear to the country as well. In the north where I come from, they are battling with desertification, a lot of felling of firewood. And so it's very important to educate, and this must start from the institutions, our people, our youth, and the need for a friendly environment, and to train them in using other sources that will not be harmful, like training them in the use of briquettes rather than firewood and so on, turning their attention from that firewood felling, which is not friendly to our environment, to other friendly sources. I hope I've been able to answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think very also interesting features and experience from Nigeria. First of all, in terms of challenges, of course, the magnitude of the youth employment issue. We've also a particular challenge regarding women and girls, in particular in the northern part of the country, as you indicated. At the same time, very interesting policy initiatives, the introduction of the competency-based education and training as a kind of a main principle throughout the system, the definition of the national qualification framework, which is also an area of reform that we also see in many other countries. PPP, public-private partnerships, as also a policy option for promoting and developing training delivery in a really market-relevant manner. I noted also the importance you placed on ICT, which is, I think, very important to note as a way to develop TVET in an open and flexible way, including to reach out marginal, populations in rural areas and women, which I think is essential. And finally, the experience also of Nigeria in the development of renewable energy curricula, which is quite important. And we are here in the building of UNFCCC, and I think it's even a good illustration of how also TVET can contribute to climate change mitigation. So thanks again for those perspectives. I'd like now to turn to another region of the world with Costa Rica. So I'd like to ask Mr. Victor Hugo Diaz Mora to give his perspective. I think Mr. Mora will speak in Spanish. Am I correct? Yes.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks to UNEVOC for this initiative. My presentation will be in Spanish, and my friend Luis will be the translator. Vengo de Costa Rica, del Instituto Nacional de Aprendizaje.
I came from Costa Rica for the National Institute of Learning.
El INA, como le llamamos, fue creado en el año 1965, hace 51 años.
The INA was created in 1965, means that it's 50 years old.
Como una institución de capacitación y formación profesional para jóvenes a partir de los 15 años.
It was created to train young people from the age of 15 years old.
El INA tiene su presupuesto propio, producto del 1.5 de la planilla de todas las empresas del país.
The budget of the INA is funded by the 1.5% of the labors, the part of the companies.
Y está formado por una junta directiva conformada por el gobierno, el sector laboral y el sector empresarial.
And the board is, in the board there are the government, labor force, and representative of the private sector.
El INA ha definido una serie de políticas institucionales para lograr sus objetivos.
INA was developed, was create policies in order to achieve their objectives.
Entre ellas tenemos el desarrollo de acciones de formación profesional para atender personas jóvenes en desventaja social.
And one of the objectives is to work with disadvantaged young people.
Estos jóvenes que requieren formación para insertarse en el mercado laboral.
The young people need to be trained in order to achieve the employment.
En el tema de sostenibilidad ambiental, un tema importante para UNEVOC.
About the theme of greening sustainability is an important objective for UNEVOC.
Se ha avanzado en una perspectiva curricular, ofreciendo formación.
We work on it, and we achieve some curriculum to do different courses.
Esta formación incluye competencias en empleos verdes.
This includes green skills.
Y la institución ha definido una política ambiental.
And the institution was developed environmental policy
que busca prevenir los impactos negativos ambientales.
To prevent the negative effect in the environment.
Además, hemos definido una serie de objetivos estratégicos sobre este tema.
Also, we was developed on particular objectives about this thing.
En este tema también, que es muy importante para UNEVOC, el fomento al empleo juvenil y el emprendedurismo.
And also we include another important aspect is about young employability.
En todos los programas de formación, el INA incluye en forma transversal
and in all of the trainings in transversal way, INA includes
el tema ambiental, como por ejemplo el tratamiento de aguas residuales o agua potable o el uso de energías limpias.
And these are to manage the water, water treatment and waste management.
Además, para la atención de los jóvenes, que es el interés de la institución,
and also because we work with the young people and we are focused on them,
se han preparado una serie de programas país para atender a los jóvenes.
We prepared different strategies to take care of them.
Programas como Empléate o Mi Primer Empleo.
We develop programs like Empléate or My First Job.
Como iniciativas público-privadas que buscan la inserción de los jóvenes en el mercado laboral.
This initiative work with the public sector and the private sector in order to include young people in the labor force.
Igualmente, para la atención de los jóvenes, a partir del año 1993,
and also to work with the young people since 1963,
se definió el programa de formación dual.
We define as the dual learning.
Y en este momento se está discutiendo un proyecto de ley en el Congreso.
At this moment, we are discussing at the Congress level a new law
para definir la formación dual ya en una ley y poder atenderlo de mejor manera.
Just to reinforce the dual learning since the new law that we are working with.
Asimismo, para atender a los jóvenes, el INA está definiendo un programa de unidades móviles.
And also to attend the demand of the young people, we are working with mobile units
para llevar la formación a lugares alejados de la capital.
To bring this training far from the capital city.
Donde no tengamos centros de formación.
Where there are not formal institutions in the rural areas.
Esto como una respuesta rápida para atención a las comunidades alejadas.
This is just to support the far citizens who are far from the capital.
Para lograr sus objetivos y atender a toda la formación, el INA definió 12 sectores o núcleos de formación.
Just to understand how the INA works, the INA defined 12 sectors or nuclei of learning.
Estos núcleos son, por ejemplo, en turismo, en electricidad, en metalmecánica.
These areas are tourism, electricity, metal mechanics, as an example.
Okay, y con esto logramos cubrir los 55 centros de formación que tenemos en todo el país.
With this, we cover the 55 centers around the whole country.
Finalmente, quiero ratificar que el INA está comprometido con los objetivos de UNEVOC y seguiremos trabajando al lado del señor Jamal en la consecución de estos objetivos. Thank you very much.
And finally, I just want to say that our commitment with the UNEVOC objectives, and we hope to work a strong way with Mr. Jamal. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor Diaz Mora. Fue una presentación muy interesante. I believe that this, brought us a very interesting, also and unique perspective. Just to stress one or two points that I noted. First of all, in terms of funding, the very interesting model with a 1.5 payroll tax, which is really the basis for funding the training system, which is a model existing in most Latin American countries with a governance based on the principle of tripartism with a representative of government, employers, and social and unions. So I think this is also an important element to note. In terms of the programs, the focus on the environmental knowledge and skills as a transversal, approach across all training programs, the development of partnerships with the private sector through targeted programs for youth employment, but also through this new law, which is being finalized for introducing dual training in Costa Rica. Again, I'd like to take the point that was made at the start by Mr. Thiele, saying that we cannot actually transfer models, but we can transfer principles. So I guess this is a good example. Also, some of the principles have been actually applied in a very particular, very different context in Costa Rica. Finally, in terms of disadvantaged groups and learners in remote areas, also this delivery system, which includes mobile training units to reach out, remote learners, is something also I think quite worth noting. Thanks again for this perspective from Latin America. We are now returning to Europe, and I'd like to ask Mrs. Snežana Marković to give us the perspective from Serbia.
First of all, I want to thank you for this great opportunity to be part of this great event. And I'm looking forward to introduce new TVET strategy in Serbia. If you allow me, I will slightly change the order of my answers. I will leave the challenges for the conclusion of my speech. The Republic of Serbia is currently implementing several strategic documents that are directly or indirectly related to youth education and employment, as well as sustainable development. These are primarily the Strategy of Education Development in Serbia until 2020, the National Youth Strategy 2015-2025, as well as the National Strategy of Sustainable Development until 2017. Within the Strategy of Education Development, the following principles relating to sustainable development have been set out. First, the educational system of Republic of Serbia has a duty to timely, properly and efficiently educate the population of the Republic of Serbia in accordance with the expressed and recognized development orientations towards sustainability. Further development of the production system in the Republic of Serbia should be rapidly based on knowledge, entrepreneurship of the educated population, its own transfer technological innovations, and without adverse impact on the environment. Within the framework of the National Strategy for Sustainable Development, there is a part that refers to education for sustainable development. The term education for sustainable development implies not only the implementation of content regarding sustainable development into the educational system, but also a new system of education that supports a knowledge-based economy and represents a necessary precognition for sustainable development of economy and society as a whole. However, the education about sustainable development in a narrow sense of word is a prerequisite and important tool for good governance, decision-making and the promotion of democracy, strengthening the capacity of individuals, groups, communities, associations and the state when deliberating and selecting in favor of sustainable development. In order to achieve this, education of sustainable development must ensure that the integration of knowledge from all relevant sectors, environment, economy and society, with a special emphasis on the application of that knowledge in order to provide better quality of life for all citizens. Technical vocational education and training in Serbia is being implemented at the levels of secondary and higher vocational education, EQF levels 2 to 6. Qualifications that individuals acquire are directly or indirectly related to the implementation of sustainable development in the Serbian economy. This way, the necessary human capital with the appropriate competencies is being created. At the secondary educational level, it consists of general and vocational part, while in the context of higher education, it is primary vocational. As for the general education, general standards of achievement for the completion of secondary education have been prescribed, that is, the subject and cross-curricular competencies to be achieved by the end of the education have been set. Within the reform of secondary vocational education, 58 new curricula have been developed and they are currently being implemented based on the qualification standards, that is, established competencies and learning outcomes. The principles of identify learning outcomes that are clearly related to sustainable development have been entered into above-mentioned curricula. Also, in the last few years, we are trying to incorporate some elements of dual system in some profiles with the help of Germany, Austria and Switzerland governments. The sustainable development topics are inherent to the areas within the sectors of biotechnology, energy, agriculture and food industry, construction, mining and forestry. By schooling students in these fields, the human capital necessary for economic development towards the implementation of principles of sustainable development is being made. As for other areas of vocational education where curricular reform has not been carried yet, recommendations have been given, and the training that shows how and which areas teachers can meaningfully connect specific areas with sustainable development has been realized. This way, the groundwork for the education process has been laid, and it consists of linking general with the vocational education subjects and the development of competencies that enable students to acquire knowledge in accordance with the principles of sustainable development and lifelong learning. Teachers and professional associates in the Republic of Serbia are obligated to undergo further professional trainings. There is a list of approved accredited programs which is innovated every 2 years. This list contains nearly 1,000 programs grouped in certain areas. A significant part of the programs focuses on linking the specific subject content to sustainable development in all learning areas. The youth unemployment rate in Serbia is very high, at the level of 30.8%, although it is lower than neighboring countries. The unemployment rate of young women is higher than the rate which referred to men, among to 35.8 versus 27.3%, while the unemployment rate in urban areas of the country is slightly higher than one in the rural areas. The unemployment rate of young people with completed secondary education is at the lowest level at 29.9%. The length of transition to the first stable, satisfactory job period is half size for highly educated young people in comparison with the young persons with completed secondary education, and it lasts in average of 11.7 against 24.3 months. The 31.8% of young people aged 15 to 29 years are employed. This rate is low compared to the average rate of 28 EU member states, which in 2013 stood at 46%. By adopting the Employment Social Reform Program this spring, and in addition to the previously adopted strategies, the government of the Republic of Serbia adopted an outline plan of activities for synergy in their implementation in order to increase the employment primary among young people. In all strategic documents, TVET is seen as one of possible solutions because at the same time it can provide the necessary qualifications, competencies lacking in young people who have completed education with inadequate qualifications or have prematurely left the educational system. By implementing the work-based learning models in TVET, the acquisition of the necessary work competencies is ensured. This function of TVET provides greater social inclusion of individuals, especially those from vulnerable groups. The main challenges in this process are in the sphere of economics, that is, finance, of course. The deep economic crisis has generated an increase in unemployment as a result of lack of investment for economic growth and hence the creation of new jobs. The other challenges depends on this main challenge are less popularity and attractiveness, as we heard from previous speeches at TVET schools, except of ICT, which is the most popular in Serbian schools. The other challenge is slow response of school system on fast changes in labor market and some others that we are fighting for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Marković. I'd like maybe to stress two elements from your presentation. First of all, in terms of the policy approach which is followed in Serbia to actually address issues of youth skills and employment, it's interesting that you place this issue at the junction of three policy domains: education and training, youth, and sustainable development. So I think it's a good illustration of this intersectoral approach, which is required in the context of sustainable development. And as we move to the new sustainable development agenda, I mean, this approach will be, needed in all countries, and it also, brings, I'd say, at the higher level, the issue of policy coherence as a key principle for effective policy making and implementation. A second, I think, interesting feature of the experience of Serbia is the, I would say, transversal, approach to education for sustainable development as also a fundamental principle. Again, I'd like to recall that UNESCO was leading the decade for education for sustainable development that ended in 2014. We are now doing follow-up work within what we call the Global Action Plan. In fact, we had a meeting last week to, define the initiatives in this domain. And it's important to note through the experience of Serbia as an illustration that TVET is fully part of the broader domain of education for sustainable development, with also very clear implications in the way the programs are developed and designed within the context of the qualification framework in Serbia, with this new 58 curricula that you developed, but also in really following a competency-based approach, trying to clearly identify how learning outcomes for specific programs are and relate to specific areas of sustainable development. So I think this is a very, interesting perspective of how, in very concrete terms, TVET can actually serve and contribute to sustainable development. So thank you for this contribution. For the last speaker, I will ask colleagues who are not francophone to take their headphones. We will move to Morocco, and we will continue in French. Je vais passer la parole maintenant.
I will now give the floor to Mr. Jamal Eddine El ALOUA, who is Secretary General of the Department of Vocational Training at the Ministry of National Education and Vocational Training of Morocco. He will now introduce the system and the mechanism Morocco has put into place in order to face the challenges of youth unemployment. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for your invitation and to have given Morocco this opportunity to introduce his experience and also the way we wish to help young people. Morocco, during the last years, has put in place a reform of education and higher education, and there is a report of our Commission for Technical Research in order to follow up this strategy. And we will also introduce to you the launch of the 2021 strategy, of which I've brought with me some copies, and well, if you wish to have a copy, I can give them to you, and I can also recommend you to visit our website where the strategy is also published. It is a strategy which aims vocational training and lifelong training for all. So in order to talk about challenges we face in Morocco, well, we've got a school dropout rate which is very high, and also an unemployment rate which is very high amongst young people. And for us, it was very important to answer and to find solutions for those challenges, to this phenomena, which is very high and very important for young people. So what are our answers? You know that when a 15-year-old leaves school and well, I think every young people and all parents will always say that their child should be a doctor, should be an engineer, and should go to the university. So every young people will always want to go to university without knowing that the university training is a very long one. So if this, even if he's not really interested in university, he will always go or try to go to university because the vocational training is not very well seen or very well considered in Morocco. In Morocco, the vocational training just goes for 2 years, and for the parents, those 2 years are just not good enough. And we know that today, even if young people get their graduate from university, and if they don't have any perspective, they would go back to vocational training, and that is always the difficulty. This is always the challenge. We aimed to put into place a system in order to counsel children from the early age. For example, we would advise them from the primary schools on what are their interests and what are their potentials or their competences, and we would try to guide them through these school systems. And in order to face the school dropout challenge, we didn't choose to make the difference between technical school and general school because this would give the children the impression that they are not good enough if they are going to the technical schools. So we have a general school system where everybody will go until the secondary level, and after the secondary level, they could choose between the university and the technical training. For us, it was very important to create these curricula, those technical curricula, in order to prevent the early dropout of children. We've worked with the Ministry of Higher Education and have created a transition path for children in vocational training. We have now 2 professional or vocational paths, which are the technical path and the general path. Those who will undergo a general path can choose to go to the technical or to the technical university also, and I think that those 2 paths are a very good solution for the moment. And then what's more important is the inclusion of young people. We know that that girls account for 42% of the vocational training, and we also know that a major part of girls go to to sectors, industrial sectors, like for example textile, or also less interesting sectors. And at the moment, we are analyzing why those girls chose those paths which are not very promising. %32% of girls are trainers in vocational trainings. In order to encourage people to prevent those discrimination. We've put in place departments within our ministry to work on this, and we've also put in place focal points in different regions. Why? Because the Ministry of Education and Higher Education has to guarantee the inclusion and the integration of all, but 14 departments of our ministry have to work with the private sector and also with different companies. Our strategy has been adopted by all stakeholders, amongst them the private sector, or also the trade unions in Morocco. So our strategy has the general aim to guarantee lifelong learning without discrimination, and also the strengthening of industrial development. As for your third question, what is our contribution to the SDG 4? Well, I think Morocco is very active on this contribution, and we are now we now are putting into place 3 referral systems. We want a system through which young people can go to university, can go to vocational training, but also within companies. Today we've got 64 companies which can train young people, and the state can delegate the training to different companies, and we are working now with companies which work on sustainable development and sustainable energy. Those institutes and those companies are recruiting young people, qualified young people, and they really train young people based on their needs, on their specific needs, so that we can guarantee for those young people serious prospects after their graduation. The aim, as you know, would be the sinking of unemployment rates. There is also a very strong partnership between car industry and environmental institutes, and we now have this system of referrals for young people. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Lalouat. D'abord.
Thank you, Mr. Lalouat. Thank you to have introduced to us the new strategy of Morocco, and you said that this new strategy is coherent to the UNESCO strategies, and this is really something which is very reassuring, and we see that your the policy interests and attention in Morocco is very high. You told us that guiding young people is very important, so that they can also choose vocational training, but they also have to be integrated within the general system. You underlined this initiative, which gives you the possibility to direct those young people from the secondary school on to vocational training, so that they can avoid being discriminated after school or after their training. Yes, we know that there are still school dropouts, and we also know that vocational training is not very well considered within different countries. You've also talked about the identification of bridges, of transition opportunities, so that we can interlink the two systems, the general system with the technical system, and that this transition paths are very important to give the young people the opportunity to go to university after their vocational training. We think that this is a very a key instrument in order to guarantee lifelong training also. You talked about dual systems. You also talked about the cooperation with the innovating cooperation with different companies, and then you talked about the COP22. During the COP22 in Paris, we reflected very specifically about the role, the key role the TVET should play in order to prevent the climate change and their disadvantages. I think that Morocco has a big contribution to that, and you mentioned energy, which is a key sector when we talk about climate change.
International perspective with those contributions from different regions. I'm afraid that because of a time constraint at this stage, we don't have the time to engage with the room, but we will certainly have this opportunity later during the day. I would like to stress again that the issue of the attractiveness of TVET and the image of TVET in society is I think a challenge which is actually shared by many countries, and this is exactly what we're going to actually explore in more details in the next panel. So again, I'd like to thank all the panelists for their contribution. I would like you to join me to give them a raise of applause. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the panelists and for David for the great moderation. Before we release you into the well-deserved coffee break, I want to have a few small announcements. But first of all, I would like to invite some special guests to the front. As you know, this is World Youth Skills Day, and so far we have only enjoyed presentations and words of more advanced youth. We also have real youth champions here, and I would like to ask to the front quickly Tobias Armbruster, who is from Germany and who will be presenting some skills outside. He will be presenting aquatronics virtual reality demo, so please enjoy this. This will be in this coffee break. Then in the coffee break from 3:30 to 4, we have Karin Fischnaller from Italy. She's a world champion, a world skills champion of 2011, and she will explain a global classroom project where youth workers solve water and sanitation issues in Southern Africa. Also at 3:30 to 4, we have Anna Prokopenya from Russia. She's a World Skills Champion of 2015, and she will present patisserie and confectionery, so you will get something sweet from her as well. And to round it off at 17:15, so 5:15, once we conclude with this session, between the end of our session and the beginning of the reception, we have Bart Deutsch from Belgium. He's World Skills Champion of 2013, and he will present restaurant services and make cocktails and show you the art of cocktail making. So we're very proud to have these young champions with us, and please enjoy the presentations.